Russell's pole may look safe on the timing screen, but Ferrari has found the one question that can make Mercedes panic. Did he actually lift? Because Verstappen crashed at turn 9. Yellow flags came out. Antonelli backed out. Leclerc was waiting for pole. And Russell still crossed the line fastest. 1 minute, 6.113 seconds. That lap gave Mercedes control, but it also gave Ferrari a weapon. If the telemetry shows Russell lifted clearly, Mercedes survives. But if the data suggests he stayed too committed, carried too much speed, or failed to sacrifice enough time under yellow flags, then this is no longer just a qualifying controversy. It becomes a credibility crisis. Russell's words get tested. Wolff's defense gets tested. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile's decision gets tested. And Leclerc could suddenly be the driver Ferrari believes should have started first. But the most dangerous part is inside Mercedes. One driver backed out when danger appeared. The other kept going and took the reward. And if Ferrari proves that reward came from a yellow flag breach, Russell does not just lose pole. He loses trust. Subscribe to the channel. The first thing that makes this controversy so dangerous is that Ferrari does not have to prove Russell was slow. Ferrari only has to prove he was too fast in the one place where speed should have disappeared. That is the heart of the story. Because a pole lap is normally the cleanest kind of achievement in Formula One. One driver, one car, one final attempt. The clock decides everything. No strategy calls. No pit stop timing. No traffic excuses if the lap is clear. But Russell's Austrian pole was not clean in that way. It arrived with a crash in the background. Max Verstappen had gone off at turn 9. Yellow flags had appeared. The final sector had changed from a place of attack into a place of caution. And in that exact moment, Russell did the one thing that made the whole paddock stop and stare. He completed the lap. Not only completed it, he went fastest. 1 minute, 6.113 seconds. That number should have been Mercedes' proof of dominance. Instead, it became the number Ferrari wanted everyone to question. Because Leclerc was close. Very close. Close enough that every fraction suddenly mattered. Close enough that a small lift, a late lift, or a missing lift could be the difference between Ferrari starting first and Mercedes keeping the most powerful position on the grid. That is why the telemetry question is so explosive. Telemetry is not a feeling, is not fan opinion, is not a team principal being angry after losing pole. Telemetry is the car's truth. It tells you what the throttle did. It tells you where the driver lifted. It tells you how much speed was lost. It tells you when the driver returned to power. It tells you whether the lap was truly sacrificed or whether the driver kept just enough momentum to survive the review and steal the result. And that is why Ferrari's angle cuts so deep. Because Russell's entire defense rests on one simple claim. He lifted. Mercedes' entire defense builds from the same place. He saw the yellow. He reacted. He reduced speed. He lost time. But if Ferrari can make people doubt that sentence, everything changes. Not because Russell suddenly becomes slow. Because Russell suddenly becomes questionable. And in Formula One, questionable can be worse than beaten. A beaten driver can come back next weekend. A questioned driver carries the story with him. That is where Mercedes begins to lose control of the narrative. Because from Mercedes' point of view, the explanation is technical. The flag was single yellow. A single yellow does not automatically delete a lap. The driver must reduce speed and be ready to change direction. If the stewards are satisfied, the lap can stand. That is the legal route. That is the route Mercedes needs. But Ferrari does not need to fight the entire rulebook at once. Ferrari only needs to attack the word enough. Did Russell lift enough? Did he lose enough? Did he show enough caution? Did the lap look enough like a driver responding to danger and not like a driver protecting pole? That word is small, but it is brutal. Enough. Because enough is where Formula One becomes uncomfortable. A driver can lift the throttle for a moment and still be carrying serious speed. A driver can reduce speed slightly and still gain compared with someone who abandons the lap completely. A driver can technically react, but still make rival teams feel the response was too narrow for the danger ahead. And that is exactly what Austria exposed. It exposed the gap between what is legal and what feels safe. Mercedes wants to live on the legal side. Ferrari wants to drag everyone into the feeling. And the feeling is powerful because the images are simple. Verstappen crashes. Yellow flags come out. Antonelli backs out. Russell keeps going. Leclerc loses pole. That sequence is almost impossible to erase because people do not need to understand every line of the sporting regulations to feel the tension. One Mercedes driver treated the warning like the lap was over. The other treated it like a risk to manage, and only one of them got rewarded. That is the detail Mercedes cannot easily explain away. Because Kimi Antonelli is not a random comparison. He is Russell's teammate. Same team, same car family, same pressure, same Mercedes garage. And when the yellow appeared, Antonelli removed all doubt. He backed out. No gray area, no lap to defend, no telemetry argument, no question about whether the lift was enough. Russell chose the harder path. He kept the lap alive, trusted his reaction, and took pole. That can look brilliant. It can also look dangerous. And Ferrari's entire opportunity sits inside that split. Because if Ferrari can say, look at Antonelli, he understood the danger, then Russell's choice begins to look more aggressive. If Ferrari can say, look at Leclerc, he lost pole by a tiny margin, then every meter of Russell's yellow flag sector becomes suspicious. If Ferrari can say, look at the telemetry, the lift does not match the story, then Mercedes is no longer defending a lap. Mercedes is defending trust. That is the pressure point. Trust in Russell's words. Trust in Toto Wolff's defense. Trust in the steward's first decision. Trust in whether a single yellow flag is being enforced strongly enough when a pole position is at stake. And trust inside Mercedes itself. Because Antonelli's decision creates an internal problem even if nobody says it publicly. Imagine the feeling from his side of the garage. You see the yellow. You back off. You protect the team from risk. You make the safest possible choice. Then your teammate keeps going, takes pole, and the team spends the rest of the session defending why his decision was acceptable. Even if Antonelli understands a rule, that moment teaches him something. Caution cost him. Risk rewarded Russell. That lesson can sit quietly in a driver's mind. Not as anger right away. Not as a public complaint. But as a memory. The next time a yellow flag appears, does Antonelli back out again? Or does he think about Austria? Does Russell feel validated because the lap stood? Or does he feel watched because Ferrari has turned the lap into a case against his judgment? That is how a single qualifying moment begins to shape the future. And that is why Ferrari's telemetry threat is bigger than one grid position. It could change how Mercedes manages its drivers. Mercedes needs Russell's aggression. They need him sharp. They need him willing to attack when the lap is alive and Ferrari is close. A driver who hesitates too often does not win pole positions in Formula One. But Mercedes also needs Russell to keep the team out of unnecessary controversy. That is the balance. Speed without trouble. Aggression without exposure. Risk without damage. Austria made that balance look fragile. Because even if Russell's lap remains official, the story around it is no longer clean. And when a pole is not clean, rivals have something to press. Ferrari knows that. Vasseur knows that. Leclerc knows that. They understand that Mercedes is strongest when it looks untouchable. When the car is fast, the drivers are calm, the timing screen supports them, and the team speaks with one voice. This controversy breaks that image. Now Mercedes has to explain. And every explanation keeps the yellow flag in the story. Russell has to explain when he lifted. Wolff has to explain why it was enough. The stewards have to explain why no further action was needed. And Ferrari only has to keep asking the same question in different ways. Did he really lift enough? That is why this is such a perfect attack. It is simple, it is emotional, and it sounds serious because it is tied to safety. Ferrari is not just saying we wanted pole. Ferrari can frame the issue as something bigger. Yellow flags must mean something. A crash zone cannot become a place where drivers calculate the minimum possible sacrifice. A lap that passes through danger must be judged with absolute clarity. That argument is powerful because nobody wants to sound casual about safety. Mercedes cannot respond by saying this is just racing. They cannot make yellow flags sound like track limits. They cannot treat Verstappen's crash like background noise. They have to show respect for the warning while also defending the lap that won them pole. That is a very narrow line. And narrow lines are where Formula One teams make mistakes. The deeper problem for Mercedes is that Russell's name already carries some history with yellow flag debates. Earlier in his career, he was punished for failing to slow sufficiently under double yellow flags. Those cases do not prove anything about Austria. They do not decide this moment. Every incident must be judged on its own facts. But perception does not work like a courtroom. Perception connects patterns. Fans remember. Rivals remember. Commentators remember. So when Russell ends up in another yellow flag controversy, the reaction becomes louder. It does not feel like an isolated moment. It feels like a story returning. That is not fair in a strict legal sense. But Formula One is not only legal, is psychological. And Ferrari's pressure works because it attacks Russell psychologically as much as technically. A technical attack asks whether the lap should stand. A psychological attack asks whether Russell can be trusted when the limit becomes blurred. That is much more dangerous, because Russell is fighting for authority at Mercedes. He is not just trying to beat Leclerc. He is not just trying to stay ahead of Hamilton or Verstappen. He is trying to prove, in a team being reshaped by Antonelli's rise, that he is still the driver who can lead from the front. A clean pole helps that mission. A controversial pole complicates it. A pole under telemetry suspicion threatens it. That is why the stakes are so high. If Ferrari's data claim collapses, Russell survives, but the controversy still leaves a mark. If Ferrari's data creates doubt, Mercedes has to fight harder. If the data ever proved he did not lift enough, the damage would be massive. Leclerc could gain the position. Ferrari would get the front. Russell would lose not just a lap, but a piece of credibility. Antonelli's cautious decision would suddenly look smarter. Mercedes' public defense would look weaker. And the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile would face questions about whether the first review missed the most important detail of the entire session. That is why the possibility alone is enough to create tension, because the consequences are too big to ignore. Pole position at the Austrian Grand Prix is not just a trophy for Saturday. Is control of the race start? Is clean air? Is strategy priority? Is the ability to dictate the early laps instead of reacting from behind? If Leclerc starts first, Ferrari's race changes. If Russell starts first, Mercedes controls the opening phase. That is why Ferrari will fight over 2/10. That is why Mercedes will defend every meter. That is why the yellow flag zone becomes the most important part of the lap, even if Russell found time elsewhere. Because in a session decided by tiny gaps, no section is harmless. Especially not the section where danger appeared. This is what makes the story so hard for casual fans and so fascinating for the paddock. Russell could have been faster overall and still be questioned in one zone. He could have lifted and still be accused of not lifting enough. He could have lost time and still be asked whether the loss was meaningful.